Okay, so on to the next Torah portion in the first book of the Torah, as we unpack some historical and biographical details of our matriarchs and patriarchs, but really it's not about the history, it's about the lessons. And this coming week's Torah portion is chock full of events, and we're going to deal with one that seems relatively minor. But first, let's get to it's on page 106. Good morning. Good morning. Page 106 in the books, and we're going to do the Parsha overview. It says here that Jacob returns to the Holy Land after a 20-year stay in Haran. Just to recap, Jacob is born as a twin. His twin is named Esav. At one point in their lives, he vows to kill him. Jacob is encouraged by his mother to skip town. 106. And he runs away to his uncle in Turkey, Lavan. And there he gets married and he becomes wealthy. And after 20 years, he heads back home. Not sure about how his brother feels about him. Jacob returns to the Holy Land after a 20-year stay in Haran and sends angel emissaries. The reason they put it there is because the word used in the scripture is the word for come pull up a chair. But I don't think that there's one. Well, there's one right now. Okay, thank you. Okay. The word for emissary and the word for angel technically are the same. The one that it's word malach, which is in today's vernacular used more to mean an angel, but it technically means an emissary because an angel is God's emissary. So it says that Jacob sent malachs, and there's a debate whether he sent angels or human emissaries to Esau. We're not going to get into that today. In hopes of reconciliation, he's coming to Israel. He knows his brother is murderous and wants to kill him. He says it's 20 years. Have you gotten over it yet? Have you seen therapy? But his messengers report that his brother is on the warpath with 400 armed men. Jacob prepares for war, and he prays and he sends Esav a large gift. He strategically prepares for war. He tries to diplomacy, and he prays for God that something will work. Consisting of hundreds of heads of livestock was the gift to appease him. That night, Jacob ferries his family and possessions across the Yabok River. He, however, remains behind and encounters the angel that embodies the spirit of Esau, with whom he wrestles until daybreak. This is a very famous scene in Torah thought. Jacob wrestling with an angel. That's where Jacob suffers a dislocated hip, vanquishes a supernal creature, which bestows upon him the name Israel. That's how we get the term Israel, which means he who prevails or who struggles with and prevails over the divine. Finally, Jacob and Esav meet, embrace, kiss, but part ways. Jacob purchases a plot of land near Shechem, whose crown prince, also called Shechem, abducts and rapes Jacob's daughter Dinah. Dinah's brothers Shimon and Levi avenge the deed by killing all male inhabitants of the city, after rendering them vulnerable by convincing them to circumcise themselves. That's another big story. We're not dealing with it today. Jacob journeys on. Rachel dies while giving birth to her second son, Benjamin. Jacob has 4 wives. The Torah describes his most beloved wife is Rachel. She dies in childbirth. He buries her by the side of the road outside Bethlehem, still in Israel today. The tomb of Rachel is a very, very revered place. The people visit consistently. Right now, you have to visit with armed, bulletproof buses and security, but it's still a very, very treasured place. Reuben loses the birthright because he interferes with his father's marital life. Jacob arrives in Hebron to his father Isaac, who later dies at age 180. Rebekah had passed away before Jacob's arrival. Our parsha concludes with a detailed account of Esau's wives, children, and grandchildren, and the family histories of the people of Seir, among whom Esau settled, and a list of the 8 kings who ruled Edom, the land of Esau's and Seir's descendants. We're going to deal with something that, in the scope of the Torah portion, is just a blip. It's an asterisk. Is that when Jacob came back to Israel, he set up tents. For whatever, I don't think it wasn't a huge piece of property, and then he bought it. And it tells us the price. I'm going to talk about that. Where the conversation is going to take us more for our own psyche and our own approach to life is in 2 places. Number one, it's about the inherent value that Jews through the millennia have had for the land of Israel. Something to be buried in Israel, which has been a very big deal always, and it's still today, of having a burial plot in Israel for many people. That's a high value, or even owning land there. And then there's another thing which works its way into the conversation, which was I would call it it's a sense of looking for positivity, or maybe a positivity bias, as opposed to a negativity bias. A negativity bias would be that we have in I think in human nature, if you meet someone and you've had a very pleasant conversation with them for 2 hours, and there are a lot of positive anecdotes there, and there's one nasty comment out of 100 positive and friendly comments, the likelihood is what you'll remember is the nasty comment. That is something. It's there's a book someone wrote, two rights don't make up for a wrong. That's just human nature. That's not the way it should be. It's just necessarily, that's just the way it is. We remember it. If you remember a teacher, the teacher could have been great. There's one mistake where they hurt your feelings. That's what you remember for the next 40 years. So that is human nature. Then there's a Torah idea of trying to find the positive and highlight the positive and remember the positive and accentuate the positive. And that's going to be part of our conversation at the end. But first, as we've been doing lately, this year in this course, we've been delving into a commentary of Rashi, the primary Torah commentator.
What does that mean, ad lock? Rashi ad lock?
Oh, at that location. It's Latin, not Aramaic. I can't tell you exactly.
No, but it usually refers to a specific text.
Yeah, right. So there, text 1a has a location 3319, and I don't know what that look is. It's Latin, but it's this on the location we previously mentioned.
Okay, so it refers to one.
The Rashi on that, yeah, on that. No problem. So, so text 1a is this piece, and again in a Torah portion that has a lot of drama, something that's not so dramatic. Jacob comes back, he comes to Israel, but really what we're thinking about is the confrontation with Esau and all that. When he comes, it says, well, what do? He sets up tents. He's got to have tents. He's got to sleep tonight. But then it says that he purchased the part of the field where he pitched his tent. Not only did he pitch his tent on public property and move on, it was in a trailer park. He actually bought the property from the sons of Hamor, father of Shechem. Shechem was a city, but Shechem was the name of a person also, conceivably named for him, for 100 kasita. Kasita is not to be confused with the Spanish casita, a little house. No, right? Casita, but casita is used by the Torah, the scripture. It's not a normal Hebrew word. We don't know what a casita is, and it's not a little house. Maybe he bought it for 100 little homes, but he paid something, some commodity, with to buy this piece of property. Rashi he has to try to explain this for the 5-year-old, and the 5-year-old is going to say, "What in the world is a casita?" Yes,
I'm looking at 1A through 2B,
yes.
and you've got 4 different endings on the same verse.
Well, I am going to explain that. Yeah. Torah is all about differences of opinion, and you get it here. So Rashi wants to know what's a casita, because a child wants to know what's a casita. He says a casita, even though it's not a normal Hebrew word, it is a coin, otherwise known in Hebrew as a ma'ah. You're not going to be familiar with those terms, but that in Torah lexicon we know what that is. It's in scripture. It's something called the gera. It's all the same. It's that you've heard the term shekel, because shekel is known today. It's in Israeli currency. Shekel is a biblical currency, and a 20th of a shekel, which means like a nickel. If a shekel's $1, a 20th of a shekel is a ma'ah, gera, or casita. Okay, so it's a nickel. So he bought the property for 100 nickels. Okay, but $5? Yeah. Okay. So this is maybe a shekel was worth more, so it's a little more than $5. But you want to contrast that we had a drama, because it is important to understand. There was a whole drama a month ago where Abraham needed to bury Sarah, and he bought in Hebron. He bought what's known today as the cave of the patriarchs and the matriarchs, Moras HaMachpelah, which has been and is still a very, very sacred place to Jews, and actually to Muslims also. There, he buys it for 400 shekel. So that sounds like more of an investment. And there's the drama. He's going. He's negotiating, and this is he's buying an ancestral burial area. Here he doesn't say what he's buying it for. He set up tents. He said, "You know something? I'll buy it. Well, $5. Whatever it is, it's definitely a lot less than the 400 shekel. This is 5 shekel, and that's what's 400 shekel by Abraham. So now he says it's known as a ma'ah. Then Rashi adds something which is unusual for Rashi, because Rashi just wants to help the 5-year-old to understand the flow of the verses. He quotes a great rabbi of the Talmud, Rabbi Akiva. He says, Rabbi Akiva said, "When I traveled to the cities by the sea," in other words, when I went out afar, not here from Israel, but I went out to travel the world, I found that they called a ma'ah, or this, what we call a nickel or a gera, a nickel, they call it casita. So Rabbi Akiva is saying this is a scriptural Hebrew word. So he's coming along and saying, a casita is a nickel. How do I know? Because I went to Africa or to Crete, and over there they call a nickel a casita, which is a little bit of a funny calculation, even though language is language. He brings this in, Rashi brings this in, not just describing or interpreting what is a casita, it's a nickel, a ma'ah. He's saying Rabbi Akiva learned this from his travels outside of Israel, not from Torah scholars, but just from the linguistics of what he heard in different countries. Okay. Now, we want to understand what's that whole deal about. So let's move a little further. Text 2a. It's not, this casita doesn't necessarily have to be translated as a coin. The earliest and very, very respected translation of the Torah into Aramaic in Talmudic times, the Targum Yonatan. He says, the way he translated it is, he purchased a part of the field where he pitched his tent from the sons of Chamar, son of Shechem, for 100 gems. Because the Hebrew of casita is you can see it's related in Hebrew to kishutim. So he says, it wasn't coins. It's 100 diamonds. So then that was much more expensive than 5 shekel. Also a very respected Aramaic translation, a little bit later than the 1 and 2a. The 1 and 2, this is in 2b. We'll Targum Onkelos. Says he purchased a part of the field where he pitched his tent from the sons of Hamor, father Shem, for 100 sheep. He doesn't have it as gems; he has it for sheep. So there are different ways of understanding what Jacob used to purchase this piece of property. Rashi goes with coin, even though kasita and coin it's hard to understand it until you bring out that from some other language, some other people, somehow that gave us insight. And he bypasses two earlier interpretations. One would be there was 100 gems, and one would be the 100 sheep.
I mean, looking at this though, it seems to me to be more than just a transcription error.
Transcription error? Who said error? I never said.
I mean, because you look at how significantly different the ends of each sentence are.
It's not a transcription error. It's about interpreting a specific word, scriptural word, which is kasita in the Hebrew, kasita, which is it's not used today in Hebrew, and it's not even used in the Torah. It's used one other place. So it's what does that mean in our language?
Yeah.
Or the language of the French. Rashi says it means a coin. Jonathan Ben Azil says it means gems, 100 gems. We know it's 100 of something.
Right. I mean, looking back at Rashi's interpretation, he says coin. Okay, the other two apparently are looking at what makes the most sense to them rather than what is necessarily written.
I don't know that. They remember at that time barter was very central to commerce. So the idea of him buying land for gems or sheep was not an unusual thing. It's really they're trying to figure out what this odd word means. And it is linguistically related. You can see why it's related to gems. That's easier to see. A little bit more of a stretch for sheep. Coins, well, Rabbi Akiva he says Rabbi Akiva had this way of doing it, but it's really only trying to figure out what did it cost him? 100 what? Okay. And Rashi says 100 nickels, whatever. So text 3a, for whatever reason they put this in, that this is, I mentioned it before, that we know from the Torah we have the shekel, and that there is a shekel is broken down into 20. Well, we're like if you use the dollar model, nickels, there they call it a gera, and Rashi 3b will tell us that a gera is a ma. So gera, ma, whatever it is, that's normal Torah language, and here we're saying that it is that's what kasita means. Now, why didn't the Torah just use ma? Why doesn't the Torah just use gera? I mean, what's the deal with this? And how does Rashi know that it's a coin? Why does he say that the Torah is referring to something that it uses this equivalent of a nickel in using different verbiage? And here he's saying it's that, but it's using a different word. So now let's get into some of the more psychological, psycho-spiritual perspectives that we can glean from this.
What's the significance of trying to figure out the price of the coin or payment for the tent?
Yeah.
What's the difference with cost 500 or?
Well, that's actually a good question also. I'm glad you bring it up. But that's not a question on Rashi, that's a question on the Torah. Why is the Torah tells how much it costs? Torah doesn't get into history. So he bought it. It happens all differently in the case of the Torah, doesn't it? In Abraham's case, it was part of a very involved discussion, and 400 shekel was a lot, and the Torah wants us to know that, apparently. So that makes more sense. It's not a question. But here, why does the Torah tell us that? So it's not a question on the commentaries, it's a question on the Torah. Okay. Good question. But once the Torah tells us, what is it? What was it? Okay, fine. So let's go to page 111. Okay, and we're going to go to text 4. I'm going to go back. Says we say, where does this whole thing stem from? We had this idea. Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem. He's coming to Israel. His first place he lands is Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, which was eventually Israel, and he arrived from Padan Aram, which is Turkey, Syria, and he encamped before the city. So, and then it says that he bought the property. One of the things that the commentaries tell us about this is, why does the Torah tell us that? The Torah wants to underscore how much Jacob valued the land of Israel. That even once he came and he set up shop, even though he didn't want to live there, and he didn't think necessarily that this was a great investment financially, he bought land because it was Israel. He wanted to put down, to establish more of a permanence in his residency.
If I'm missing something, you said it was border of Turkey and Iraq.
No, I didn't say border. I said he came from that the Turkey Syria area. Padan Aram is okay. Text 5a. Quote Maimonides here. Maimonides writes in his laws, he says, our greatest sages would kiss the borders of Israel and its stones and roll in its dust. It means when they would enter Israel, they would bend down and literally kiss the ground, which has been actually, even in common times, when people land in Israel, some people just, they kiss the ground in Ben Gurion Airport, because the land of Israel is so special to us. As the psalmist declares, behold, your servant holds her stones dear and cherish her dust. And Maimonides continues, our sages taught, the sins of those who dwell in Israel are forgiven. As the passage states, the inhabitants will not say, I am sick. The people who dwell there are absolved of sin. This is Isaiah, and what the Talmud is driving home to us, is telling us, is trying to tell us that even though obviously we are responsible for our own actions, but living in Israel gives us a leg up. And just, Leon, I see you're asking a question. I just want to finish this paragraph here. Even one who walks 4 cubits there will merit the world to come. Even visiting Israel is special for the soul. Those buried there receive atonement as if their burial place is an altar of atonement. And that's indeed many people make arrangements so that they are buried in Israel. Okay, let me just see.
Rabbi, can I ask the question now?
Yeah. I was looking to see if there's sure, please.
Yeah, my understanding is that there was already, in addition to, or maybe I'm wrong, to Macpella, other property purchased by his father and grandfather. So, is there an importance in each person purchasing or owning the land on their own?
That's a great question. I think that the lesson, certainly the inference from the way the Torah describes it, is yes, because yeah, you're right. They had real estate there. They had, aside from the Machpelah, his parents had lived there their entire lives. They certainly owned property, but when he came back after 20 years and he'd been absent from Israel, he wanted to demonstrate his connection. So even though it wasn't a particularly important spot to him, it was the first, and therefore he put down whatever he put down to purchase it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Like you say, Abraham, he bought the land to bury his wife.
Yeah,
He wanted to give it for free. No, he said, no, I want to pay for it.
that's right. Yeah.
I'll give it for free. I pay for it.
Right. And then they said they'll give it for free, but then when he said I'll pay for it, they ripped him off. Yeah. Okay. So what this piece of Maimonides is telling us is that Israel is such a special place, and therefore the Jacob in purchasing there was trying to demonstrate that, as we know going forward in history, that just being there or owning land there is very special. And text 5b, this let's get this out of here. Okay, I don't know how to do this. Try this again. Okay. Text 5b tells us that owning a portion of this land is like owning a portion of the world to come. This is from a great Spanish rabbi, about Rabbi ibn Ezra, and he said just the very idea, obviously, as Maimonides says, even visiting or being there, but owning a piece of Israel is very special spiritually. And Nachmanides, a generation or two after Maimonides, writes, Jacob did not want to be a guest in the city. He wanted his first entry into Israel to be on his own real estate. This is why he settled in a field and then purchased it to establish ownership in the land. But so we understand why the Torah says, even though it wasn't so relevant there, that he came to land. He's facing this clash with Esav and all of the drama. And says he set up tents and then he purchased the land. He purchased the land to show us how important it was. But we still have a Gennadi's question: is who cares how much it cost? If it was an outrageous price, like 400 shekel, okay, then we're talking about that. That's important for us historically. There's a lesson there. That's one thing. What's the deal with the 100 whatever it was, especially if it was 100 nickels? Okay. Text 6. This is from the Rebbe, and I'm not totally sold on their translations. I'm going to just shape it a little bit. To explain the significance of this coin, Rashi quotes Rabbi Akiva. Why does Rashi bring this Rabbi Akiva thing? Say what it is. Say it's a nickel. It's a gator, a mo, whatever language we use. And this kasita was an odd word, but it's a nickel. He says, he goes and he says, Rabbi Akiva tells us that when I traveled to the cities by the sea, they called the ma, the equivalent of the nickel into a shekel, a kasita. The word kasita connotes kishutim, ornaments. And that's why that great rabbi, Yonatan ben Uziel, said it was gems. So then, why would this not least valuable coin, but a minimally valuable coin, the nickel, the ma, be called an ornament? So he says, this means, what the Rebbe is saying is that Rabbi Akiva was saying is that this out there, perhaps in Israel too, but this nickel was used as a bauble. It was used as it wasn't just a nickel. Nickels had, aside from their monetary value, they were used for fashion. This demonstrates that sometimes, even if the monetary value of the coin is insignificant, it can have, I would say, not sentimental, but fashion value when it is used as an adornment. They're therefore called adornments. So the reason that they started calling the nickel a kasita was because the nickel was being used as an accessory, a fashion accessory. They're putting it in the lapel. I don't know what they were doing with it, but it had a value beyond its money. It was an ornament. They're called ornaments.
Lucky charm.
What?
A lucky charm.
A lucky charm. Using the foreign name kasita informs us that Jacob, out of love for the land, used special coins to purchase a parcel of land in Israel, coins that doubles as ornaments. What Rashi is telling us is that Jacob, he loved the land. Buying the land was a very special exercise to him. He got it for cheap. He didn't buy much. It was, $5. But instead of giving $5, if you give $5, you wouldn't give it in nickels. You wouldn't give it in dimes. But because the nickel was used as an ornament, he used those to show that even though it's relatively minor, that he showed his value for what and his esteem for what he was purchasing by saying, I'm not just buying something for $5. I'm also giving you these 100 baubles, because these are respected fashion accessories. Right? Otherwise, you could have just given 5 shekels. Now another point of this, going to what I will call a positivity bias. Before I go to the next one, and I'll be on 115. Rabbi Kiva is known in the Talmud as someone who searched to find positivity in the world, in people. He noticed the positivity and he commented on the positivities. Often we only comment when something's going wrong. Rabbi Kiva liked to catch people doing something right. And he always tried to cast a situation, and especially his people, the Jewish people, to try to frame a perspective on the people, not ignoring the truth, but being able to focus on the positives so that the positives don't get lost sometimes in some of the negatives. In one thing here in text 7, as an example of Rabbi Akiva, there's a discussion in the Talmud of what happens. We believe, obviously, that the soul never dies, and the soul goes on to a higher life, and the soul in higher life has the benefit of the mitzvahs, the good deeds that were done during human life, and the soul has to also wrestle with or come to terms with the mistakes that were made, and there's a journey of refining the soul and getting a proper perspective and cleansing ourselves of our mistakes. There's a debate in the Talmud. What about a kid? Kid doesn't have mitzvahs, especially if a kid was not raised by good people. So there wasn't the mitzvah atmosphere. Rabbi Akiva says, God takes care of them. Don't worry about it. They don't have mitzvahs. God takes care of them. God welcomes them and they're taken care of. How does he know? Rabbi Akiva said they are granted entry into the world to come. As the passage states, God guards Pitoim. So a verse in Psalms. Pitoim means simpletons. That God guards the simple. That if people, they're well-meaning, they don't, certainly not, there's no malice, but they make a mistake. King David says in Psalms, God takes care of them. God guards the simple. Rabbi Akiva gives takes the liberty of giving a different linguistic twist, and he says Petoim doesn't mean simple; it means children, because he says he was a well-traveled person, and then he goes back in the cities by the sea. They call a child Patya, Petoim and Patya. So Rabbi Akiva is doing something a little questionable here. He's interpreting a Hebrew verse of the Psalms. And Petoim means simple. But because he so much wants to establish as a matter of perspective that God takes care of these children who did not benefit of being raised in a good atmosphere, and they didn't have the benefit of their own mitzvahs because they're young children, he he massages the verse to say, since in some other language, in cities by the sea, they call a child patya, King David is also referring to children, patya. God guards the children.
Rabbi, would King David have known this term?
I don't know. I don't know if there's any way of us knowing it, and I don't know that Rabbi Kiva claimed that.
I see.
I think what Rabbi Kiva is saying is that he believes theologically that God would guard these innocent children, and he's taking some liberty to say that while King David pretty obviously had in mind simpletons, the simple, when he said Petayim, he, contained within that word is a verse that is a message that God also guards the children. There's a certain attitude, and it's something. It's really a faith thing. That when you're dealing with words of truth, then there are going to be different layers, and sometimes even the person who uttered them didn't have them in mind, but it's flowing from a holy place. Like the Rebbe used to say about Maimonides. Maimonides is a person we see of truth, and he has this extensive code of law, and there are thousands of interpretations on Maimonides. And the Rebbe said, do you think Maimonides could have had in mind all these different archaic and arcane nuances and derivations of his words? So probably not. But if he spoke words of truth, and people can come on along later and mine it and find words of truth that he himself was not familiar with, or what didn't have in mind. I mean, that's kind of the way I see what Rabbi Kiva is saying. Rabbi Kiva had his position that God will guard these children, and he was looking for somewhere to hang his hat. Let's put it that way, and say that this is something that I don't think it doesn't do it cavalierly, saying that this is there contained. If we dig deep enough, that's contained within King David's statement. Now we'll go to text 8. And here's the Rebbe saying, in view of Rabbi Kiva, and here also I'm going to amend the translation. So intent was Rabbi Kiva's desire to cast Jews in a favorable light that his entire journey to the cities by the sea would have been worthwhile merely to gain perspective that allowed him to appreciate the Jews as they are. In other words, if I go, you travel the world, you get different perspective. And you get perspective and you say, there's certainly things you can learn from different societies. There's one way of coming back and saying, from your trip, and say, Norway or Finland is a much better society. What are we doing here? It's fine to bring back perspectives of how we can improve our society, but a good way is to come and say, to look and say, I love where I am. To be able to say, look, there's an advantage to him, and to who we are, and to our people. To pick up these positive nuances, we're going to call it a positivity bias, to be able to learn things which give new insight into the human experience, and then allowed him to be able to cast his fellow Jews, in a favorable light. To gain the ability to determine that the children of wicked Jewish parents have a share in the world to come, even if they die young. In other words, the way the Rebbe is looking at that statement in text 7 of Rabbi Akiva is that he didn't travel. He wasn't traveling there to get a tan. He wasn't traveling because, why not? It's cool. He can afford it. He was traveling the world to gain greater perspective so that he could greater appreciate his own life and the status of his family, meaning the Jewish people. And understanding more about the world gave him a broader perspective to be able to appreciate what he might have taken for granted otherwise. And that brings us to text 9. Rashi hints at this by saying, when he said about the Kasita, he says, Rabbi Kiva said when they traveled to the cities by the sea. Why is that relevant? This was the same visit to the city by the sea during which Rabbi Kiva heard people calling children Patya, by which he determined that children have a share in the world to come. The same visit to the cities by the sea yielded yet another opportunity for Rabbi Kiva, the advocate of Jews, to highlight the favor, to demonstrate, put them in a good light. He discovered in an albeit minor way to demonstrate Jacob's love for Israel. Jacob purchased land he did not intend to use as his permanent home with 100 kasita. Why was it kasita? Because those coins weren't just nickels. They were ornaments. They were fashionable. They were desirable in society. So he used his travels to be able to add to our appreciation of the land of Israel, of how Jacob valued the land of Israel. And then finally, in text 10, it says, we now understand why the Torah adds that Jacob paid 100 kasita. According to Rabbi Kiva, who always sought to cast Jews in a favorable light, we must seek to highlight a Jew's strength at every opportunity. Torah relates that Jacob paid 100 kasita, though it is a minor compliment to Israel, because this teaches the 5-year-old and us that sharing even a minor compliment is important. When we get into the habit of speaking well of others, it eventually becomes second nature. And the Rebbe was always very careful about his language and not speaking harshly. And even if he was going to say something that was a criticism, it was framed in a positive way. The Rebbe was he was a big advocate of watching the way you speak and bringing positive energy to the world. So he says, what do we learn from Jacob? What did Rashi teach us from Jacob? That Jacob came along and he made a benign purchase. It's a five shekel. A shekel wasn't that much. Every Jew had to go give a shekel. It couldn't have been that maybe it was more than $1, but it wasn't worth that much. And again, compared to the 400 shekel of Abraham, so he paid 5 shekels. So what? And that's where he put up his tent. Is that where he's sharing them with us? The idea is, as Rashi is saying, is that Jacob looked for opportunities to show his appreciation for the land of Israel, like we should grab opportunities to show appreciation for those who are nearest us. A compliment, no compliment is too minor to give. Add to the positivity of the world. And you say, so what? So he gave 100 of these little baubles. No, that's why we have to have it to read it in the Torah for thousands of years. Yeah, because the Torah is, and Rashi brings that idea that Rabbi Kiva, who always saw things positive, he said this kasita thing. The whole idea is to show that Jacob wanted to take the opportunity to give even a minor compliment to the land of Israel. Now, do key points on page 118. Jacob loved the Holy Land so much that he insisted on purchasing even the land on which he pitched a temporary tent. Number 2, this illustrates to us how important it is to cultivate a love for Israel in ourselves and in our children. Number 3, Rabbi Kiva traveled and studied languages to find ways to cast Jews in the most favorable light. He used every opportunity to highlight even minor qualities of fellow Jews. Number 4, this teaches us to look for positive qualities in the people we meet in our travels and to bring these qualities home with us to implement in our daily lives. It's not only that you see positive qualities there, it gives you context of how people live, and then you can appreciate more the people you usually take for granted. And number 5, it also teaches us that no compliment is negligible. Every positive quality we see in others should be highlighted. So, just leave
All
it.
right, I got a question.
A question,
This is such a juicy parsha.
and this is what you just.
What, what they pick? Like, there's so much other, like, to me,
You're right. There's a very juicy parsha, and what they picked, and I said this in the beginning, a relatively minor, like asterisk in the parsha. I can't tell you why they chose it, but I mean, because I don't know why they chose this specifically. But a few thoughts. Number 1, they've been doing this for year 20. Okay. The places you go to in looking at this parsha are not this. They've probably gone through all of the juicier parts. That's number 1. Number 2, they're basing themselves in this year's. Whenever the Rebbe spoke on Shabbos, from the time his mother passed away in 1965, from then, I think it seems as a tribute to his mother, because he started it then, whenever he spoke on a Shabbos, he would focus on one of Rashi's commentaries, analyze it, ask some obvious questions, and then try to help understand Rashi's thinking and take out a moral lesson. So while generally speaking, if we wanted to speak about a message from this Torah portion, I wouldn't go through a Rashi, and I certainly wouldn't have chosen that one. They are basing today's on one of the Rebbe's talks, which did focus on this. And it does give us an opportunity to understand some of Rashi's thinkings, and it does bring out, there's always that moral lesson. But you're right. We could talk about Jacob wrestling with the angel. There's so much to talk about. If there's probably no rabbi in the world, they had a chance to speak to a group, a one-shot deal, to speak about this week's Torah portion. Nobody's talking about this. But if you got 20 of them, you got to talk about the same Torah portion. Eventually, you get to it. Good question. Yes.
That means Akiva was teaching, I think, the first or second century. And
First and second century. Yeah.
Rashi was 11th century, right?
Rashi was 11th century, correct?
So he came later.
But yeah, he's quoting Rabbi Akiva's quotes in the Talmud. He lived like 1,000 years after Rabbi Akiva.
I have a question,
Yeah.
a little bit different. You refer to the land of Israel,
Mhm.
and it was way before Moses.
Right.
Because this land actually was called the land of Israel.
So the land of Canaan it was called.
Well, but in your today's lecture.
I call it Israel.
The land of Israel.
I call it Israel. I call it by its eventual name,
Eventually.
and because to us, I wanted us. If I spend the day talking about the land of Canaan, it's nothing for you to take home. It's Israel. Israel exists today. It's been out for thousands of years, and it's important to us still. So I'll stick with Israel.
So when was the land start officially called the land of Israel?
That's a good question. We're not 100% sure of that, I would say, probably. There was when the Jews went into Israel, went into Canaan, whatever it was, when they created.
You're talking about Moses and his people.
No. Moses died in the desert. I'm talking about King David and King Solomon, who's really set up. King David set up the kingdom, and King Solomon set up the temple. So that was when the Commonwealth started. They were known as the children of Israel. So it was,
Which is Jacob.
it was Jacob. So they as the people, they were known as the Bnei Yisrael. So it's very likely at that point it was considered the land of the Yisrael people. When shortly after King Solomon passed away, there was a civil war and it split into two kingdoms, north and south. The north was called the Kingdom of Israel. The south was called the Kingdom of Judah. The Kingdom of Israel was conquered by the Assyrians, and they were gone. So for many years, there was only a king. Well, there was only years there was both, and then there was only a Kingdom of Judah. So in the times of Rabbi Akiva, it was known as Judea. It was not, but in the world, but I'm sure that he looked at the thing as the Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. So the shift, I don't know if there was an official shift, but it was the Kingdom of Israel, the Kingdom of Judah, and then it came the vernacular. Yeah.
So for sages, the Holy Land at the time was the land of Canaan.
No, the sages. By the time of the sages, for sure, was it?
No, I'm talking about the ones that bought the land, including,
You mean Jacob?
yeah, Jacob and Abraham.
Oh yeah, we don't call them the sages. They're our patriarchs. Yeah,
Patriarchs, at that
yeah, with the land of Canaan, for sure.
It was the land of Canaan, which was a holy land.
It was the land that God had given them, and therefore was precious to them. But it was called Canaan.
And they bought their parcels from Canaanites. I
Yeah.
assume.
Mhm. Hittites, Canaanites, different people lived there. Yeah.
Apparently, when Joshua, came to.
Joshua.
Joshua to take Canaan, apparently they were starting naming the same children of Israel.
Yeah.
Then apparently, after David became king, most likely have established the
Right. So that was the kingdom then, but
Israel.
it's
But like I said, it's very.
yeah.
Are these cities by the sea that they keep referring to in today's thing, are those Accra and Gaza?
No, it's not. It's not. It's actually in the Medrash. It says it's in Africa.
Hmm?
The Medrash tells us he was talking about Africa, but I don't think Accra and Gaza. It means he was out. It could have been Greece.
No, Africa is not complete.
The Medrash says Africa. He doesn't say Africa, so it could have been. Rashi doesn't adopt that particular perspective, but I don't think he means that.
From Egypt to Tunis.
What?
From Egypt to Tunis to Morocco.
That could be. No, but the rabbis in the Talmud went to India and Greece.
Rabbi,
Yes.
a while back, you had sent me a link to the recordings and I searched my email and I wasn't able to find that. So could you either maybe like repost it in the comments during next week's call or share that when, if it's possible to get that?
Sure. That I need Mendel and Debbie Marcus take care of that. I'm gonna look because so just to tell you, if I could do it, I would do it right now.
But yeah,
I can look through my emails to you and see maybe I can forward that. I don't know if that's gonna work.
that'd be great. If you want to give me, if I may reach out to them and ask them for it, I'd be happy to do that as well. Take that off your plate.
I think if you're looking for today's.
No. Anytime.
Okay. Yeah, because Debbie has to post them. She posts them on a YouTube something. I don't know exactly. So that's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
today will be done yet for a while. Okay.
Not a
That's fine.
problem.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Good week, everybody.
Don't accept it.
Thank you.
Thank